Hi, my name is Elizabeth Popp. This is video blog 1 about a police movie. I watched End of Watch starring Jake Gyllenhaal. The main character's name was Brian Taylor. The reason that I watched this movie is that my brother was a police officer for many, many years, and he actually worked with the LAPD, and this was his recommendation. So I actually got so into it the first time that I watched it, I had to watch it a second time because I forgot to take notes. So my first example of whether or not the officers followed constitutional law, which in this movie, I have to say I didn't really see anything that wasn't constitutional. I think they did a really good job of representing quality police work, which I think is really impressive. Okay, so the first example, they were called to a house where the mother specifically had reported her children missing and were invited inside when they arrived. They noticed drug paraphernalia. The mother was obviously strung out. There was also a man there. There was no indication whether this was the father or a boyfriend or whatever. He was very combative and insisted that the children were at their grandparents' house, and Officer Taylor heard a noise. They ended up cuffing the male subject. Officer Taylor heard a noise, continued through the house. Because they had been granted entry, I felt that it was constitutional for him to continue through the house. Also because this was a concern of child welfare. He was well within his rights to look for the children, especially upon hearing a noise. He did end up finding the children taped up in a closet. Both parents were placed under arrest. It did not show any sort of Miranda reading. Child Services was called, and the situation was handled that way. So my second example is the officers were kind of staking out a house. They weren't necessarily supposed to be, but they knew that something was wrong. So they were kind of staking out a house. They noticed an interaction between two individuals, and they wanted to talk to one of them. So in order to have probable cause, in order to have a reason for pulling over the subject that was leaving the house, they looked at the car to see what they could use as probable cause. He had a CD hanging from his rearview mirror, which would obstruct visibility and is against it's against the law to have something like that hanging from your rearview mirror. So that is what they used as their cause for pulling him over. Upon pulling him over and telling him that that's why, the subject pulled a gun and tried to shoot the officers. He ended up firing a few rounds before officers relieved him of his weapon and arrested him. The second car that was called actually took him into custody. There was no Miranda rights. They did search the vehicle. I wasn't completely sure about this one, about the justification for this one, whether it was because the subject had fired on them or if it was because of the Carroll Doctrine. I wasn't perfectly sure on that one. I looked back through the books and I did a little bit of research, but I believe that the Carroll Doctrine does apply. A crime had occurred with the shooting towards the police officers, and they had probable cause to stop the car because of the CD, and they did end up finding guns and money. So, which is what they were expecting. They found Liberace's AK. If you haven't seen this movie, you should probably watch it because it's funny. Okay, so my third example, I mean, it's horrible, but it's also funny, is that a homeowner called. She lived out of town. Her elderly mother lived in a home that she owned. She had not been able to get her mother on the phone. So she called for a welfare check. I believe because the mother was not a tenant, not someone paying rent, that it was within the scope of ownership for the daughter to allow entry and to do this welfare check. She was not with the officers because she lived out of town. They knocked, did some phone calls, no answer, so they did end up kicking in the door. And they actually found that the mother had been murdered, and the house had been taken over by part of a drug cartel. It was kind of a murder house, which is super gross. So they did enter lawfully due to a welfare check. They believe there was danger to the health or life of the occupant. And so because of that, the evidence that they uncovered at the house would have been legal. They were not specifically looking for it, but they found it during a legal search. Okay, so I think that does it on that. Yeah, again, it's a cool movie. It's sad and stuff, but yeah. Okay, the end.